Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Cinemacast podcast. I'm your host, Mike C. Welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. Today we are talking about the 2023 release of DC's The Flash. Before I get into today's episode, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below and check out other great material that we have on the channel. From video uploads to other episodes of Cinemacast, to our live streams, our other podcasts, game compilations, and much more to come. Also, if you want to follow us on our Twitch page, twitch.tv/arrow with a name when we go live, go over there and hit that follow button as well. We're also on social media. Social media links are down below in the description section for our Twitter and our Instagram feeds. Also, if you would like to join us on our Discord server for updates and much, much more, click the link down below in the description section for that as well. Also, if you are a fan of the channel and you wish to donate at any time, our Cash App link is down below in the description section as well. So let's get into it. So The Flash. I recently finally got to watch this movie in full. This movie came out June 16th. Here it is, September the 1st, as I am recording this episode. This movie came out back in June, and I'm just now getting around to watching it. So this movie was one of those movies that was going to get axed at the beginning of the year for whatever reasons, but it came out. So development of this film that was based around the Flash, it began in the 1980s. Now, you know, superhero movies are, they're very common nowadays. They weren't as common back in the 70s and the 80s and throughout the 90s. You had some comic book, characters come to life in some movies. You had variations of Iron Man, some Spider-Man. You had the Incredible Hulk, who had his TV show back in the 80s. And Batman, of course. Batman was big back in the 1960s. And then, of course, had the big reboot, Tim Burton's version, come out in 1989 of Batman. And Batman ruled throughout the 90s, all the way up until Batman and Robin, which was the worst in the whole franchise to this date. It may be enjoyable as a popcorn flick, or just something that's on TV and you feel like watching something cheesy, and that's all that movie was. It was very cheesy. It was like watching Adam West from the 1960s Batman. That's how Batman and Robin felt. But all these movies that have come out, there's been so many anime movies, there's been so many TV shows, but now, ever since the mid to late 2000s, superhero movies have been a common thing. Marvel has released over 20, maybe 30 movies since 2000 and something, all revolving around the Avengers and that whole timeline with the Infinity Saga and all that. And every movie is good. Every movie has its pros and cons, whether you're a superhero fan or not, whether you do enjoy these movies. They're all pretty good, and then there's some that are bombs. Well, not complete bombs, but I wouldn't exactly call them stinkers, but not many people care for certain superheroes. Take Black Panther. I think Black Panther was widely overrated. It was very emphasized and very overrated. I guess, people figured this is like the very first black superhero out there, It's like, well, there have been black superheroes in comics that have been done before, especially the ones that are like the anti-heroes, sort of, but still a hero. Remember Blade? Wesley Snipes played Blade. He did that character very well. He was the vampire hunter. Remember Blade came out in the late 90s, carried on into the early 2000s. But then again, nobody really knows much about Wesley Snipes anymore because he went to prison for tax evasion. That was always fun. But he had a slew of good movies in the 90s. Wesley Snipes did, 80s and 90s. But, he was one of the big ones back in the day that was a black comic book hero / anti-hero, whatever. But Black Panther came out and everybody they felt like they could they feel like they can get with it, I can't even think of the word right now. I had the word on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't even think about it. but it was a character that they can all relate to, I guess. You know, it's a black superhero. You know, he's got this awesome suit and these amazing abilities and shit. But I feel like the movie was widely overrated. It made what, over $1 billion or something in the box office, but I watched it and I could not see what the hype was with the movie. I'm sorry, I wasn't a fan of Black Panther. He's a good character and all, but I don't see him that widely that good for that movie, at least. You know, it was very overrated. It was very overhyped, and I found it kind of boring, you know? Like, I watched it, it was alright, it wasn't my thing. Maybe because I didn't know much about the character's background, I didn't know much about the comic book series that revolved around the Black Panther. But, as this is saying, you know, a film based on The Flash began in the 1980s with multiple writers and directors attempting the project all the way up until 2014. The film was then redeveloped as part of the DCEU with Ezra Miller cast as the title character. Now, there are a couple TV shows out there. I think one main TV show that was on the CW for The Flash that did come out. People were watching it. I never really watched it. All I knew of The Flash was he had this ability to run really fast, and, you know, he wasn't super strong or whatever, you know, but he was very fast, and he had the ability. He had, like, Superman's ability to, you know, go through space and time, you know, like time travel, that kind of thing, revert time and stuff. So he had that ability to do that. Multiple directors were attached to the film over the years, with Seth Grahame-Smith, Rick, I don't even know what his last I'm not going to pronounce it, and the duo of Daly and Goldstein, all departing the project over creative differences. Let's see, the film was influenced by the comic book storyline Flashpoint, featuring other DC characters such as Callie Supergirl and both Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton's versions of Batman. Principal photography took place in October 2021 at Warner Brothers Studio. Flashpoint, let me talk about that. So there was a movie that came out, I think it was called Justice League Flashpoint or whatever it was. I watched that. That was actually pretty good. You know, it was an anime film. It's where the Flash goes back in time, or he goes into an alternate dimension where, let's say with Batman's parents are usually the storyline is Batman's parents are both murdered in an alley, you know, and he becomes Batman because of that. Well, in the alternate universe, Bruce Wayne dies, and eventually Martha dies. I forgot how she died, but his father ends up, you know, becoming what Batman should have been, but he ends up becoming a different version of Batman. I forgot what version of it was. And there's other superheroes as well, you know, from the multiverse series, you know, Flashpoint. But he eventually returns back to his own time and everything's restored and such. So it took a lot of emphasis from that, where there's an alternate dimension, or he goes back in time and he changes something, and something ends up happening, and it's like, you gotta think, when it comes to time travel, and I covered this in a recent podcast, when it comes to time travel, if it's at all possible, which I'm sure it is, if it's all possible, there's different timelines in our existence, if you want to think scientifically about it, you know, very logically about that, like Stephen Hawking was. You gotta figure, not just in the superhero universe, but what if you go back in time and you change one minor thing, one little mundane detail of your life? What if you go back in time and change something, and you come back to present time? What would be different about today? There would be a subtle difference about today. If you were to go back in time and kill Hitler before he took over Germany and all that, what would be different about today? How would World War II have ended if Hitler was murdered and taken out before his reign over in Germany and all? Think about it. With time travel, in movies like this, there's always something that has a negative or a positive effect on something. The Flash premiered at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles June 12th, 2023, and was released in the U.S. June 16th, following multiple delays caused by director changes. So, with the directors being constantly brought in and taken out, along with the COVID-19 pandemic hoax, post-production setbacks, and controversies surrounding Ezra Miller. The film then received mixed reviews from critics who praised its humor, action sequences, and the performances, but criticized the third act and visual effects. The film did gross $269 million worldwide and became one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, with projections of a $200 million loss for Warner Brothers. I don't really... I guess I can see that, yeah. Well, not really. Budget was between 200 and 220 million. It made 268 million, just over, the limit. I wouldn't call it a box office bomb, though. When I watched it, I enjoyed this movie all throughout. I was hooked in the story. I did see the Justice League. I saw Batman versus Superman. Justice League turned me on to, what could have been the DC extended universe with characters like Cyborg, Aquaman, not too much of Superman. I tried getting with Man of Steel. I tried. For me, Man of Steel was boring. Like, the last act of the movie, I'm sure it was something else, his battle with General Zod. But for the most part, and I understand it's the story of Clark Kent adjusting to life down on Earth, and, with his adoptive parents and stuff. It's him adjusting to life in general. But the movie's like almost 3 hours long. And most of the movie, I fell asleep. It's just something about me. I just, lost my attention for it. That's like with Superman Returns, back in the day when that movie came out, with Brandon Roth in the lead role. And of course you got Kevin Spacey as fucking Lex Luthor in the movie. It was like, oh Jesus Christ, he was an annoying motherfucker. Don't get me wrong, Kevin Spacey, he does have some good roles, in certain movies, but that one wasn't really meant for him. But Superman Returns, it was bad, but I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than Man of Steel. And because Superman is just one of those movies I could never really get into. I don't know why. I just couldn't get into Superman. But I do feel like, when it comes to Batman vs. Superman or Justice League, Henry Cavill, he was definitely made for the role. He's a good actor. He's out there. I think he's kind of underappreciated. Henry Cavill is underappreciated. He has some good roles. He's pretty good. And, when it comes to like movies like this, with the Flash, with the character of the Flash, I only knew of certain things. And then Ezra Miller, that kid's he's only 30 years old. And he has very few movies under his belt. What did he work on here? He was in a movie Trainwreck. Who the fuck was that? That's what's that? Amy Schumer. No, it's got Bill Hader in it. Okay, Bill Hader. He was in Justice League, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. He had a cameo in Suicide Squad back in 2016. Not too many roles in television. Not too many familiar roles. Like, a lot of these movies I've never seen or never heard of. So he's not very well known. But let's go with the controversies along with him. He had a disorderly conduct, back in 2011. In 2020, a choking incident. On April 6, 2020, a video surfaced in a since deleted tweet that showed Miller choking out a woman and throwing her to the ground. The video was confirmed by Variety to have been taken place at a bar in Iceland somewhere that Miller frequents in the city. Bar employee identified a person in the video as Miller, who escorted him off the premises with the staff after the incident. In September of 2022, a representative of Miller claimed that the supposed strangulation was a spontaneous reaction spurred by a group of teenagers taunting Miller over their mixed martial arts skills, and they did not strangle the woman, but went at her collarbone. So that was one incident right there. In March 2022, Miller arrived on the island of Hawaii from March 7th to March 28th. He was the subject of 10 calls to the police because of various minor incidents, such as filming people at a gas station, loitering on a restaurant sidewalk, and arguing with people. Eventually, Miller was invited to live with a couple at a hostel in Hilo after Miller allegedly became acquainted with them in a farmer's market. This led to disorderly conduct and harassment and such. April 19th of that year, I believe last year, he was taken into custody for second-degree assaults. And then there was his relationship with, Dakota Iron Eyes and the Messiah Complex. That was last June. Then there was harassment allegations. June 16, 2012, mother and a 12-year-old child were granted temporary harassment prevention order against Ezra after they said he threatened the woman's family and showed inappropriate behaviors toward the child. Then there was Vermont incidences and burglary charge. So this guy, holy shit. And this is actor Ezra Miller, who portrays the main character, Barry, in The Flash. This guy has a lot of incidences under his belt for harassment and all. And this was one of the big reasons why they were going to delay or at least cancel the premiere of The Flash. They were going to cancel it, just like there was supposedly a Batgirl or a Supergirl movie that was supposed to come out, and it was said to be good, but they canceled that. Don't know why Warner Brothers canceled that. They were getting ready to cancel The Flash. And then they were saying, oh, many people are not going to see The Flash because of all these allegations against Ezra Miller. Movie came out, people liked it, and I guess people didn't like it or they liked it. But this poor movie, it just received so much backlash because of Ezra Miller as an actor. But the movie is not that bad. It's not that bad at all. I really enjoyed it. And I will tell you why after I go into a little bit of the movie. So, let's go ahead and start with some spoilers. I'm not going to explain the entire movie to you guys, but there are some spoilers here. So, there are a lot of Easter eggs in this movie, and there's some definite cameos. But let's just say, starting at the beginning, you got Barry, who is the Flash. Barry, he's struggling with life. He's struggling, remembering to the day that his mother died. I don't remember too much of his family's background in the Justice League movie. But he states that, his mother was murdered, and there is flashbacks of it. So, his father, who is played by Ron Livingston. If you don't know who Ron Livingston is, he had a role in the movie Office Space. He's amazing. He played Barry's father. So apparently there was a day that happened where somebody broke into their house. They intruded the house. Father had come home, found the mother laying on the floor with a knife stabbed through her. And Barry went and got the police. And by the time the police got there, they accused Barry's dad of murdering the mom with no real evidence. So after taking care of a job with Batman at the beginning of the movie, the first 10 minutes of the movie, they're chasing after some thugs who stole something, and they were successful in retrieving back this item. But Barry relies on Batman to take a look at some store footage to try to claim his father's innocence, but is unsuccessful with it. So there's one night where he happens to revisit the home that he grew up in. And he starts having all these mental flashbacks of what had happened. He missing his mother, what happened with his mom. He's dealing with being a superhero. He's dealing with his job. I think he was still going through college. I can't remember. But he's dealing with a lot of things. It's very stressful on him, especially after his mother passed away, after his mother died when he was young. So this in turn causes him to start running. Kind of like a Forrest Gump kind of thing. You're running away from your past. You're running away from your issues. And it's like the only thing that calms him down is he just runs. He just keeps going. But then he notices that he starts running almost as fast as the speed of light. Like, he's running faster than he normally really does. But then when he goes into like it's kind of like a dimension where he starts seeing time being reverted back. It's like he's reversing time. And he notices like the faster that he runs, he's reverting time back to a certain period. And then he comes back to the original time. And he meets up with Bruce Wayne about it. He tells Bruce about it. And he said, yeah, it's a spectral, this and that. He starts getting scientific with it. And he tells him, try not to do anything, because if you go back in time, you could change something, and it could have, great repercussions for the present. So the more Barry starts to miss his mom and wishes that he can go back in time and change something to where his dad doesn't have to go out to the store to get something, that he could be there, nobody break in and kill his mom. So in turn, Barry ends up using this special ability, goes back in time, goes to the grocery store that his mom's in, and puts a can of tomatoes in the cart. And he's like, don't forget to buy the tomatoes. That way, his dad is not forced to go out and buy a can of tomatoes when she's cooking dinner. So he takes care of that, and then he starts reverting back to his time period. And he sees that his mom is still alive. And he sees all the happy times that he spends with mom, growing up. They're celebrating his birthday and everything. And then something happens. Something ends up happening. This figure in this time spectral ends up knocking him out of place. And back to a period where he's about, 19 or 20. He's fresh out of school. He's going to college. Still living at home with his parents. So he ends up, in a time where he meets up with himself, which happens to be the day that he gets those powers. So he makes sure that still happens, that, his younger self still ends up with the powers, that he has. But then something goes awry. They meet up at the lab, and unfortunately it's somewhere where he doesn't end up working at, so he did change something a bit. He changed it. He screwed up majorly. Like, one of the things he majorly screwed up in this time period. So apparently he brings up Back to the Future as a reference. And everybody around him is like, oh, you mean Eric Stoltz, is the best Marty McFly out there. And he said, no, Michael J. Fox is Marty McFly. He's like, no, Michael J. Fox is not in there. Michael J. Fox is in the movie Footloose. And he's like, no, Kevin Bacon's in that movie. And somebody else, Kevin Bacon? Who's Kevin Bacon? So it's hilarious. You got this moment of clarity where everybody's just like, oh, what? It's like watching an episode of The Simpsons. Every time Homer goes back in time and changes something, and something ends up different every time he comes back. So he's like, okay, I messed up big time. I'm really messed up. So he proceeds to help out his younger self with getting the powers. But in turn, while he's struggling with his younger self, because he's afraid that he's going to get struck by lightning and all these chemicals are going to end up on him, which is what happens. He's sitting in a lab one night, and there's a bunch of chemicals that he's studying in front of him, and a lightning bolt ends up striking through into his office area, hitting all these chemicals. They splash on him, and he gets these powers. So in turn, not only did his younger self get these powers, but his former self ends up powerless. So throughout the next act of the movie, he's got to figure out how to get his powers back while going through a whole lot of other things. He's trying, and of course around this time period, this is where Man of Steel would come into play. So you got what's his name? He plays General Zod in Man of Steel. Michael Shannon. So Michael Shannon's General Zod is seen on TV. You know, he's coming to Earth to find Superman. You know, so he can, you know, kill him or whatever. And they say, okay, we need Superman, but we need Batman to find him. So of course, you know, they track down, you know, where Bruce Wayne lives. He knows where Bruce Wayne lives. So both of the Flashes, both Barrys, they go back. You know, they find Batman, but it's not the Batman or Bruce Wayne that Barry remembers and knows. It's not Ben Affleck. Now, Ben Affleck, he is in the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, so that is his one good role right there. That's his last time playing Batman, was the first 10 minutes of this movie, and he still does an amazing job. You know, Ben Affleck is still an amazing Batman. But they go back and they find Michael Keaton's Batman. You know, he's all hairy, he's got a big beard growing, you know, he's kind of washed up. You know, the whole mansion that he lives in is old and withered out and abandoned, but he's living there. Batcave is still intact too, but this is probably where, you know, Bruce Wayne in this time period, he hasn't been Batman for years because, you know, crime has been down in Gotham City, so there wasn't really much reason for him to come out. But they did, you know, persuade him, stating that we need your help to find Superman, you know, this being, da-da-da-da. And I forgot what had happened there. You know, Barry is looking up, you know, some information on where Superman could be, Clark Kent, and they end up tracking it down. And then Bruce Wayne agrees to help them up to a certain point. And, you know, so you got Michael Keaton, you know, he's donning the bat suit once again, and he looks good in it. You know, he's shaving up and everything. He gets in the bat suit. They're flying the Batwing out there. You know, unfortunately, there's, you know, you're not. You do see the car, you do see the Batmobile, but it's not used in the movie. So it's just there as like a visual prop. But they use the Batwing. You know, they go out to find Superman, and they free him from his prison where he's at. But turns out it's not Kal-El, or I think his name was Kal-El, but it's his cousin, I believe. Yeah, it's his cousin, Kara Zor-El. So it's Supergirl that they find. They don't find Superman, they find Supergirl. So they free her. She ends up absorbing the sun, getting her powers back, and she's good to go. After this point in time, they all head back to Bruce Wayne's manor. They discuss everything that's going on, and they find a way of reverting Barry's powers back to him. He has to have that freak accident again. So with the help of Supergirl and Batman back at his, you know, back at the Batcave, they are able to channel lightning right back into Barry. He restores his powers back. So now you got two Flashes, you got Supergirl, and then you got Batman. Now comes the third act of the movie where they need to fight General Zod. Because Zod's down on Earth, he's going to start killing people left and right. So they formulate a plan, and they go out and fight Zod and his army. But something ends up going wrong. Something goes wrong. So it turns out, while Supergirl is fighting General Zod, she comes to find out that General Zod did track down Kal-El. Is it Kal? Yeah, Kal-El. I'm sorry, Superman. He tracked down Kal-El when he was an infant and ended up killing him. So in this universe, General Zod kills Superman when he's young. But what he's looking for is an energy source is from Supergirl. To which he's able to kill Supergirl in this universe and extract the element from her that he's looking for. So during the first fight through, you know, everything is going good. They're taking care of the forces, his army, you know, for a little bit, and then ends up, you know, General Zod ends up killing Supergirl. Not only that, Batman flying around in the Batwing makes a couple decisions, ends up blowing up. So now you got Flash, the younger Flash, who's like, we got to go back in time and think this thing out. So they ended up reverting time back again to the beginning of the fight, hoping that the fight would turn up differently every time that they did it. But every time they reverted back, And they did it several times, you know, and current Barry kept telling him, stop doing it. You can't do it. We're not going to win this fight. But every time he reverts time back, Batman dies in a certain way, Supergirl dies in a certain way. And even Batman had a glorious outing, you know, when he died. When Michael Keaton's Batman died, he had a glorious outing. You know, he thanked them for bringing him out and about and including him into the fight, basically. You know, he really enjoyed himself. He was very free with himself. So then you got current Barry that's trying to convince his past self, no matter what you do, no matter how many times you do it, we're not going to fix this. In this universe, General Zod wins. Everybody dies. So current Barry, he decides he has to live with the loss of his mother again. He has to go back in time and change the fact that he put tomatoes in his mom's cart. But past Barry doesn't want his mom to die. So as they're reverting back time, in the time spectral, he ends up coming across this demon figure that knocked him out the first time. Turns out it's the older self of the past Barry. And they recognize him by a scar on his face. And he basically spent the entire time in that spectral, reversing time back for a long period, you know, for years, trying to make it work, hoping that everything will work to keep his mom alive, but it kept him stuck in that time spectral. But they were able to kill off the future self. They were able to kill him off with the sacrifice of younger Barry, to the point where current Barry ended up reverting all the way back to his childhood. Well, not his childhood, but back to the period where his mom was at the grocery store. He met up with her, you know, in person. You know, she didn't recognize him or anything. He froze time, took the can of tomatoes out, and he put them back on the shelf. Then he reverted back to his time period, where everything was normal. You know, his mom was dead. She had died, but he got to say his final goodbyes to her when he could. And everything's back to normal. Now, this is the last 5 minutes of the movie. He's late for the court case with his dad, which they ended up having evidence, you know, the video evidence that they showed. And it turns out they were able to prove an alibi that his dad was innocent, that his dad was somewhere else during the time of this murder. So his dad was found innocent and released from court. But then it turned out he remembers that when he was in that time period with his mom, he switched the tomato cans around to where you could see his dad's face on camera to give him an alibi. So he did change up one slight thing with all that, even though he returned things sort of back to normal. But this is where it gets even more hilarious for me, the end of the movie. You know, they're outside the courthouse, they're cheering and everything, and he gets a call from Bruce Wayne. And Bruce said that, you know, he's happy for him, congratulations, I'm pulling up in front of the courthouse right now, see you in a minute. And he gets out of the, you know, he drives a Mercedes-Benz, he gets out of the Mercedes, I think it was a Mercedes-Benz. He gets out of the car, he walks up to Barry, and Barry's got this look on his face, and you look to see who Bruce Wayne is, it's fucking George Clooney. It's George Clooney from Batman and Robin. The biggest fucking twist at the end of the movie. It's not Ben Affleck. It's not Michael Keaton. It's George fucking Clooney. The worst of them all. And he's just sitting there like, no, who are you? Where's Bruce Wayne? He's like, come on, kid. He's like, no fucking way. It's like watching the ending to the remake of Planet of the Apes. That has that sense, the camera's just panning on Barry. He's trying to smile. He's trying to smirk, but you can see it in his face like, oh no, what the fuck did I do? I went back to straighten things out, and I fucked Bruce up. And that was the end of the movie. And of course, there's a post-credits scene, which I didn't see, but it says Arthur Curry, who is Aquaman, drunkenly stumbles out of the bar with Barry, who is explaining the effects of the timeline, revealing the current timeline to be mostly similar to the past one. Wow. So this movie, it had not many ups and downs, but I did enjoy the story. I enjoyed the, even though, and I was talking to somebody about it, and they were saying how, you know, movies nowadays, they have too many special effects. You know, all this CG in a lot of movies ruins a lot of things, and it kind of does. It really does. A lot of movies, they add too much CGI to them, and they think, oh, the special effects. People love special effects. Maybe you can watch the Titanic, you know, special effects. Hey, here's how the boat looks and all, you know. But the fact of the matter is, like, even though there's a lot of special effects with these kind of movies, to me, it's about enjoying the story and enjoying, you know, the movie as it's played out. You know, did I like seeing Michael Keaton in the role again? Yeah, I did. You know, I don't want to say it felt nostalgic for me. It probably did for a lot of other people, but, you know, just to see Michael Keaton don the bat suit again, you know, it was refreshing. You know, they had this live action version of a different timeline, and then of course you don't have Superman. You have the introduction of Supergirl. You know, which I believe that was the other movie that was said to come out, but it got canceled, and it was said to also include Michael Keaton's Batman, but that got canned. But they said Michael Keaton was in the movie too. But this was a proper send-off to Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck as well for the roles of Batman. You know, they're you know, Michael Keaton's very nostalgic to me, and Ben Affleck, he was definitely a really good Batman in the movie. You know, he should have originally been casted for the role years ago. Like, no offense to Christian Bale, but I think, you know, Christian Bale he was just too overused and too overhyped. Like, the movies were good. I do enjoy the movies, but, you know, the fact he just tried too much with it. He tried too hard with it. You know, he wasn't very suave. He wasn't very Batman. Like, you know, he was more gadgetry and all that, but with Ben Affleck, I feel like Ben Affleck was more down to earth with his Batman, with how he was, like the use of profanity and shit. You know, but he had it all. And Michael Keaton's Batman, he's just your standardized Batman. You know, he's very suave. You know, he's like, even in one scene, he looks at him. You know, they're ready for this fight. He's like, "You want to go get nuts? Let's get nuts." You know, it was. There was so much nostalgia to this. Just like when they were in this time spectral mode, and they see the world's collapsing before them because of this whole time spectral thing of what they're doing, what this past Barry's doing in the future. You see all these universes open up and they're starting to collide with each other, and you start seeing the CG versions of Christopher Reeve as Batman. You see versions of, you know, Adam West's Batman. You see the TV shows. You see the movies, you know, playing out. So there's a lot of different, you know, Easter eggs and cameos from past shows and past movies being played here. And it's just like breaking a movie that breaks the fourth wall constantly. That's pretty much how it feels in a sense. It's not breaking the fourth wall. It's not trying to, but it's introducing that multiverse of talent right in there. It's kind of like how what Doctor Strange did with Spider-Man and all. You know, the whole multiverse thing. You know, bringing in all three Spider-Man into the realm, and they're helping each other fight you know, all these villains from the different movies and such. But this movie, you know, with the, you know, despite everything, and I gotta say this, I have to say this. If you do not remember this being said years ago, so before Brandon Routh was cast as Superman, back in the late 90s, they wanted Nicolas Cage to appear. They wanted Nicolas Cage to be Superman at one point, but that was canceled out. In this movie, there's a scene. There is a scene, a 10-second scene of Nicolas Cage as Superman fighting a villain. I shit you not. Nicolas Cage's version of Superman is in this movie. If that is not worth going to see, it may be CG in a sense, but that was worth it right there too, just to see these different variations of the superheroes and the villains. There's even like I was even saying, there's archival recordings of Cesar Romero and Jack Nicholson as their versions of the Joker. Along with Eartha Kitt's Catwoman from the '60s TV show. There was a lot of different actors and actresses were praising their roles, such as Jeremy Irons. He praised his role of Alfred Pennyworth in the first few minutes of the movie. Gal Gadot, she was in there as well as Wonder Woman. Jason Momoa, he was uncredited. He was in there a little bit for Aquaman. So there's a scene where you see all of them together, of course. But this movie, it had a lot of potential, and it was very entertaining to me. Despite everything that was going on with the post-production, pre-production, the changing of directors, the whole controversy with Ezra Miller. And then there was revisions to the ending. I'll read this for you real quick, revisions to the ending. The end of the film, which featured George Clooney reprising his role as an alternative Bruce Wayne due to Barry's actions, changed multiple times during the post-production due to the constant change of leadership at Warner Brothers in 2022. The original ending shot for the film conceived of them then heads of DC Films, Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada, featured Keaton's Batman as well as Callie's Supergirl continue existing in the new timeline, but erase Cavill and Affleck's role of Superman and Batman, respectively, from the DCEU continuity. It was intended to set up for a sequel and culminate in the film based around the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline, but despite the CW already had done its adaptation in 2019, which included the DCEU and its continuity. It was also intended to set up the then and developed Batgirl prior to its cancellation, as Michael Keaton was set to reprise his role in that film. Plus, there was a merger with Warner Media and Discovery Inc. in 2022, and the removal of Emmerich and Hamada. They decided to keep Cavill within the DCEU and reshot the ending. Cavill filmed his scenes along with his cameo for Black Adam in September. Gadot also filmed the scene for the ending. The scene was meant to have generated interest in a planned Man of Steel sequel and a third Wonder Woman movie, both of them, or before they were both canceled. And then, of course, in November, James Gunn and Peter Safran became the new leaders of the DC Studios, who planned to conceive the new DC Universe as a soft reboot of the DCEU. As a result, Cavill will no longer reprise his role, and his scenes were cut, while the ending was again being reworked without Callie, Keaton, or Gadot's characters, and the final ending with Clooney was shot in January 2023, which was kept secret until the film's release. So, the ending of the film went through so many revisions, and the ending of the film, it's like, oh, don't spoil this for anybody, don't spoil it for anybody. It was kept secret until the movie came out. But that sucks, though. It sucks, like, Ezra Miller, despite everything that he has been through and he's been accused of, all these allegations against him, I think he did a fantastic role with... fantastic job with the role of the Flash and his character Barry. And in this movie, to see Michael Keaton back in there, donning the bat suit one last time. Same thing with Ben Affleck. And then, of course, the whole twist in the end, with George Clooney. And to see all these Easter eggs, Nicolas Cage as Superman, you got Henry Cavill in there in a couple of scenes. This is just an homage. I would look at The Flash as an homage to the DCEU. Even if this is the last film in the DCEU that is Snyder-based, even though this wasn't directed by Zack Snyder. But it's all in the same universe. It's all within the same universe. You got the same actors, you got the same characters. Sadly, you know, after Batman vs. Superman, after Justice League, after everybody shat on both those movies, and they pretty much canceled all these other movies that would come out. I mean, they did. I think Aquaman 2 is supposed to come out, or it already came out. I can't remember. Wonder Woman 84, I thought was spectacular. I thought it was good. Everybody didn't. Not everybody liked it, but I thought it was pretty good. Flash, I'm glad the Flash, you know, came out. I'm glad he actually had a movie for him. Green Lantern, we'll never talk about Green Lantern. Ryan Reynolds, I'm sorry. Even Ryan Reynolds hated that role. He definitely hated that role. But other than that, you know, the movie was a really good watch. I really enjoyed it. I was hooked from beginning to end. You know, and sadly, this is a movie that, you know, it got panned. You know, critics gave it a 64% rating. Or a 6.3 out of 10. The website that did this, you know, Rotten Tomatoes, the consensus read that the Flash is funny, fittingly fast-paced, and overall ranks as one of the best DC movies in years. That's what they ended up saying. Metacritic assigned the film 56 out of 100 based on 54 critics, and indicting that it was a mix of average reviews. Audiences at CinemaScore gave it a B on a scale of A+ to F. Tied it with Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice as a low grade for the DCEU. But other than that, like I said, I enjoyed this film. If you like watching DC films, if you like getting into these storylines, and this is definitely something. If the multiverse is something that you enjoy watching, like if you saw the new Batman movie, not the Batman movie, if you saw the new Spider-Man movie, you know, with Doctor Strange and all that in it, you know, that was definitely a really good watch, you know, with the multiverses colliding with that. This movie, you know, it was an homage to bring back some classics, you know, and so, you know, some last, you know, this is a movie. It's almost kind of hard to talk about because it's a comic book movie. You know, it's a superhero movie. You know, these kind of things not a lot of people are interested in. But this is one for the books, though. If you know who the characters are, if you know the history behind, you know, who plays in it and, you know, what their roles are in the past, you know, this, like I said, this movie is an homage to the DCEU. It's almost like a thank you. Even though the DCEU hasn't lasted as long as Warner Brothers wanted it to do, and I don't know what James Gunn plans on doing with the DC movies or the DC universe, you know, after this. Let's hope he does something good. But, you know, Zack Snyder, he did a terrific job with Justice League. He really did. You know, Batman vs. Superman may not have hit the spot. Justice League did. You know, if you didn't watch the 4-hour Zack Snyder cut of that, you know, then you're missing out on something with that. DCEU could have really been something, but it didn't continue on the way it should have. And The Flash is a good send-off to that. So I rate The Flash 8.5 out of 10. This was definitely a good watch. Even though not a lot of people will say it's a full 10 out of 10, I did enjoy it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was really good. You know, it is well worthy. It's close to a 9. I will give it an 8.5 out of 10. So if you guys have yet to watch it, it's right now on streaming and it is out on DVD and Blu-ray. So that does it for today's episode 3 of Cinemacast, guys. I want to thank you guys for sticking around, checking out this whole episode today. Like I said, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below if you enjoy the content we upload on here every week. Follow us on twitch.tv/arrow with a name if you guys are into live streams and you want to watch us stream lively over there or even over here. If you want to follow us on social media for updates, Instagram and Twitter, links are down below in the description section. If you're on Discord and you would like to follow us on our server, Link is down there for that as well. Also, if you guys would like to donate to the channel in any way, we have a Cash App link down below in the description section. Also, click that, donate if you like. Thank you for helping out. Thank you for supporting us. Even just coming here and watching the videos, watching our content, and interacting with us, it's more than enough thanks. Well, anyway, thanks for joining us today for episode 3 of Cinemacast. Episode 4, you'll catch that next week. If you want to know what the episode is going to be about, check us out on Monday, and you'll get a scoop in what's soon to play. And until next time, catch you on the flip.